Bonjour à celles et à ceux.
Hello to those who are joining us at this symposium within the framework of the French presidency of the European Union, co-organized by CNC and DNMI, which will be organizing with a panel discussion on how the European works can serve the European imaginary. What is a European work? How can cooperation improve works? Many questions. With us, we have Mariela Besuievski, the European Deputy, Laurence Farreng, Agnieszka, and the chairperson of Arte, the CEO of Xilam, and the Greek Vice Minister of Culture and Sports. So to kick off, we will have the Director General, Daniela. Daniela, over to you. So we'll be here at the CNC for this European panel discussion. Maria from Spain, Nicolas from Greece, and Agnieszka, who is European by definition, but Polish by origin. Global, okay, global. So it's Europe and the world. So that is what we'll be discussing. This morning we had panel discussions that were very interesting. The French minister told us that Europe must protect our European imaginary. And this is why we're here today. We heard in the panel discussion that we need protection. We need to take care of that. We need to have legislators in Europe helping us in this process. Christian Breuer also said that Europe belongs to us. It's up to us to shape it. And especially our European imaginary, we must create it and fly it high around the world as citizens of the world, as you said. So these are the issues we will be discussing during the next hour and a half. I believe that we can put questions and reach some conclusions. I hope so anyway. So let me begin straight away with a French producer who's already educating children around the world through his animated movies, which he produces and that are shown on screens around the world. So, Marc, concretely, you have the task of starting. European producers, their rights, their role in production, and today, to what extent should producers be protected in Europe? Protected and supported, and above all, how can we see to it that they can preserve their rights in future? Well, I don't know if I should speak in French or English. You can speak in French, it's interpreted. I'm fortunate in being in an area that I've been familiar with for years, because international co-protection, the global market, globalization, these are things that impact animation for years now. We've always viewed ourselves at Xilam as producers, creators, who are there to seduce the world at large. Over time, we built a unique model where we, for the past 25 years that the studio has been around, we've managed to stay the owners of our works, controlling the entire catalog. And even when we worked with the Americans, or with Asians, or with Europeans, we always built a model to protect our legacy. Protecting your legacy in Europe, what does that mean? This is both a cultural and an economic notion. Cultural, I think you all understand that. After all, we're talking about, well, it's not enough to call on the imagination and talents. That imaginary, through works, must circulate. Circulation, that means controlling catalogs and distribution of works. And if it is in non-European hands, the European dimension will never be a priority. Circulating works, that means guaranteeing the circulation of the imaginary. It's not just about creating, but seeing to it that creation is seen, broadcasted. And then you have the economic dimension that's extremely important. What are the issues for a catalog? The ownership of works. It's all about reinvesting the fruit of distribution. When you hold a catalog, you generate future revenue. And that future and the future revenue can be reinvested in creation. So managing a virtuous circular system like we've been doing at Xilam for 25 years now. So all the revenue from our catalog are reinvested in new creations. And this is how we create a family of creators who can rely on the studio to support them in their new works. I don't want to be dependent for creation, dependent on the goodwill of a partner, a broadcaster, a platform, or whatever around the world. Platforms are an extraordinary opportunity. They must be viewed as a fabulous opportunity. First of all, they allow our works to circulate around the world, and since they want to work for the world at large, they have different expectations, and they pull our profession higher up. But that's a good thing, but you must keep the initiative of our works, allow them to circulate afterwards, and not be dependent on American or Asian or any other such interests. Our European market must have its real sovereignty. That's very important, and therefore, the European directive, AMSD, I can't even remember how you say it in French now. Well, it has holes in the racket, so to speak, because it only focuses on the nationality of those who create and produce, and does not deal with the issue of who owns or controls the future of those works. And that's the most important thing as far as I'm concerned, and that must be settled if we do not wish to continue with the European naivety in the battle that you'll be waging in the coming years. So controlling rights and controlling who owns the work, and above all, and this is extremely important, the entire value chain that a producer creates when creating a catalog. Nicholas Yatromanolakis, I pronounced it correctly, I hope. Welcome, thank you for coming. I believe that in Greece you have this discussion as well. You are a country, I can say that is a smaller country in terms of movie production, smaller than France at any rate, with a cultural policy that is very much present. But what I want to know is, for you, this protection, is it even more important than for us? How do you work in Greece on the directive?
The question. I'm sorry, I'm gonna speak in English, but I think my French is not adequate enough to have such an important discussion in French. So I also thank you to the Sensei for inviting me here. Yes, in the case of Greece and smaller countries, this is an issue that is even more exacerbated. To get the practical things out of the way, yes, the directive, the AMSD directive, has already been transposed, but now we are at the critical point to determine the 30% quota, which, as we all know, is like one of the key issues in this. So I hope that we will be completed with this process soon. But you said that something that this, in my opinion, goes beyond that. I mean, for smaller countries, which means that they have also a smaller film industry, it also means that their languages are not heard as much as other languages in the world. You know, plurality is, of course, very important. It's a key factor. And that ties into how we define the European nature of a work, you know, and how do we preserve plurality? Is it okay to just say that any European language covers that prerequisite, for example, or do we go deeper into this? This is a key discussion. And, you know, also, you have to understand that when you were talking about a smaller country, that means that this country and this country's industry has limited access to funding, limited access to the markets, limited access to distribution. So, in my opinion, in order to address these issues, we should do two things. One is we should definitely have and keep a common, let's say, European front, and have a common European approach to this issue. But at the same time, we should also try to figure out ways to resolve the differences between us, because there are still differences between us, and it's natural. But I think that at the same time we have to maintain our belief that this is a win-win situation for everyone involved. For us, there are tools that are very important that maybe for larger countries are not that important. For example, 2 weeks ago, we ratified the Council of Europe European Convention for Cinematographic Co-Production. This is very important for countries like Greece because it lowers the minimum and raises the maximum of the investment that a country can make in a co-production, which means that this will hopefully give more opportunities, let's say, to Greek producers to get involved in European co-productions. So this is something very important. But for me, and I don't know, Daniela, if you want me to address it now or maybe down the road, I think the important thing is that regulation and setting up a framework is one thing, but it should definitely be accompanied by another series of measures. So I can address it now or later.
Go.
Go, okay. So, no, the landscape is changing, okay? The landscape is changing in terms of how we define when film stops and television starts, when, a nationality of a product stops and another nationality begins, when, also the distribution models change, and COVID expedited this thing. So we are in a very, very blurry situation. And we are discussing with this issue of defining things. But the things we're trying to define are changing at the same time. So this is a bit tricky. And, the public sector will always be a bit behind in this. This is a game we will never win as policymakers. So we need to do a bit more, in my opinion. And this is what we're trying to do also in Greece. So framework through the directive is very important and it's necessary. It's a prerequisite for things to happen, but it's not a silver bullet. It will not resolve all the issues just, at once, magically. So we have to invest in people. Through the Recovery and Resilience Fund from the European Union, the COVID, fund that the EU has distributed to member countries. For example, in Greece, we are investing now in the skill building of cinema people in order to make them more competitive, in order to make sure that they are they can compete with their other counterparts. The other thing is content. Is content appealing enough? I mean, we can regulate a lot of things. We cannot regulate what films people choose to watch. This we will never. Thank God, we will never regulate that. So the only thing we can do there is become more competitive and create appealing content that talks to people and that is engaging. Again, through the RRF, now we're doing this project in Greece where we're investing in the early stages of development of films through the Greek Film Center in order to say, because how it is, it's a process where it's like you plant a lot of seeds, some of them will grow, some of them not, but this is the kind of thing, and this is also something that I think states can do in Europe, which is something that the US is not doing, by the way, in terms of a state policy. And to give you an example why content is important, I'll give you some figures from Greece which are interesting in my opinion. From 2015 to 2019, from all the tickets, the cinema tickets of the country, only 7% of them went to, were Greek movies watched. So 7% were national movies. Okay, so it's an extremely low percentage. In 2020 and 21, tickets were low because of COVID, but the percentage of the Greek, the Greek piece, let's say, of the tickets was around 25%. Why? Because we had some Greek, let's say, blockbusters that combined quality but with a mass appeal, and it made all the difference in the world. And unfortunately, I mean, we made these good movies when the cinemas were closed, lucky us. But you can see that there's a difference. Of course, this didn't happen just like that. It has to do also with funding, and you have the situation where we are at the same time countries and also the European Union. We are at the same time regulators, producers, financiers, funders, interpreters between financial people and arts people because they speak completely different languages. So we have also to figure out our role in this. We had established in Greece a few years ago a tax rebate program that was actually quite successful, and that also helped these blockbusters happen that I mentioned before, and this is quite important, I think. But it's not just that. It's also how you engage with people. And but at the same time, we have to be careful what we want. We need to preserve, as Marc said, the catalogs, because the catalogs actually reflect rights, intellectual rights, and this is something very important because it's revenue that can be reused. But we also have to be careful about external funding. There are a lot of film companies, non-European film companies, that are filming all over Europe right now. In Greece, despite COVID, last year there were like 50 films made, foreign films shot in Greece. A lot of them were from American studios. Of course, we want these, revenue, and we want our crews to work. The same way, I mean, I'm sorry that I will say this, the same way, France is actually benefiting from series like Emily in Paris, although maybe, people don't like it, but it gives money and jobs to French people. But does this mean this is a French production? Does it mean that all the the films shot in Greece are Greek? No, they're not. So we have to do both. We have to be cautious with the money we get from abroad because nothing comes without ties and links. But at the same time, we have to invest in our own, let's say, national and European film industries. It's different to shoot films in Greece. It's different to shoot Greek films. And the last point I want to make is engagement. And I think I want to stress the role of festivals in this. Festivals are sometimes neglected, or they're seen as a fringe thing. And I would actually want to, and there was also a very heated discussion about festivals in the media program in the European Commission and the European Union level a few months ago, where they were trying to bundle festivals together. But we were actually one of the countries that said no, we're not ready for this, because the small festivals will suffer and the big festivals will thrive. But we have to think again, what is the point of festivals? One has to do with the market. And, it's a meeting point. It's a point where people buy films and buy rights and they network. But it's also a way to actually engage with the audience. And I think this is a very important link that we're missing sometimes. And, as being, in the Ministry of Culture, access to culture is an important thing. It's something that is a right for people, so we have to make it as easy as possible. We cannot force them, but we have to make whatever we can in our powers to actually make culture as accessible as possible. So I think, this is our approach, at least. I call it like a more holistic approach to the challenge. So I'll stop here and we can continue later. Thank you.
Je résume un peu parce que je pense.
Let me summarize a bit, because there are three wonderful things that you said. Coming back to what we said at the introduction, we need a legal framework. That is what protects us today as Europeans. We need education. And this is where we have a role as Europeans to say we can't only rely on the legal framework, but we too must be innovative and reinvent things. I also heard, and Mariela, I will turn to you afterwards. I believe that during the preparation, you said that unfortunately we're always running after time and things evolve faster than we can even think them. So we need to think even faster than the market evolves. So with the crisis. It makes things even more complicated. And then we have the public, the audience, which is large in Europe. You have the role of festivals, as you said. You have the role of spectators and producers. You have the role of performers, artists. Okay, I'm preaching for my chapel, promoting cinemas. And artists are these are the people who help us to circulate these films in the way they talk about them. It's been there alongside European cinema and supporting it. Mariela, producer from Tornasol Films in Spain. Let me recall, for those of you who'd like to listen in German rather, or in French or in English, I'm sure you understand that you can switch between all three languages even before your computer at home or in the office. Mariela in Spain. Would you say you're lagging behind? And are you catching up? Are you on the forefront of negotiations with respect to the AMSD directive? And is it the same battle, this catalog, keeping rights to these films, making the wealth of our European cinema, or protecting these rights, rather? I could also speak in English because I don't know all the words in French.
The AVMS, the European AVMS, as we spoke before, has had such a long process, beginning discussion in 2016, I think, and we have it since 2018, and we are in 22, and there are only little amount of countries that had transcribed the AVMS to the local legislation, and of course things change so fast, and things are changing every day so fast that we, first of all, we don't have a big scope of what's happening and the future results of what is happening, because everything is happening. That's my sensation, that we are in a train and we are running with the train. And but also we have to take in account that each country, the transcription has also very, very local traditions to pay. I don't know how to say it. Each country had their cultural legislation, and the AVMS, it's kind of the big umbrella. But when you are going to transpose when you are going to transpose it to the locals, it has to take in account what happens in that country. For example, in France, it has always been the rights issue, and you have to transpose it incredibly, and for all us admiring the French transposition very much, because it takes in account the rights of the independent producers. But for example, in Spain, this law, the quota exists very long ago, from 1998, 99, where we already had the quota of financing, and there was a spirit in the law, because there were no platforms, the landscape was completely different. But the spirit of the law was to help the independent producers, to have the broadcasters also investing in cinema, and to have the producers keeping the rights. So there was no problem. Now the transposition tried to maintain the same wording in the new one, which doesn't work at all, because the landscape is different, the models have blown up, we have completely different models of production. Thanks God, because it's really, really good. I think I'm really optimistic of what is happening, but it's true that you don't reply the model of a film in another film or in another audiovisual work, and that has to be taken in consideration. I'm completely in agreement that you need a framework. without a framework, it's impossible because we are little tiny dots, and we need kind of a big page where things can be written, and I really think that we need to have the framework of the rights, whether coming back to the producers, whether being partially given and partially not, according to the investment of the producers, because also I want to say very clearly, the producers, we invest. It's not that we are just paid for doing our work. It's not a service. We are the ones that initiate our work, the ones that have maybe with the authors the creative idea, but we are capable of putting the creative package together to knock the correct doors, to finance it and to develop it. And here it comes something that it's very. We had the discussion in locally in Spain, that when we say we need to have back the works, the rights, because then we are going to get just companies of services. We're going to become service providers, which can be perfectly right, and sometimes even we do it, but there has to be a combination. And but there's one point that they said, okay, but if there's someone paying for the development or for the script, why are you going to keep rights? Because it's completely different. When you develop an idea, you cannot sell it out completely, because this idea is going to go, or this work is going to go through all your life, and paying a script is not enough to give out the rights, because it's something that belongs to you and belongs to the ones that have created. And in the future, you can do a lot of things with art, but also it's part of your patrimony, as is part of the Spanish patrimony, to keep the rights of the works that are being done. So I think that just paying for a work is not enough. You give, for example, producers in development, we are not paid. We are just give our time, our ideas, our knowledge, our know-how, our time, and this is something that it's built to create strong companies. If our companies become weaker or just service companies, I think it's bad for everybody. It's not only bad for us. It's bad for everybody, because, as you said, as Marc said, reinvestment is essential. So, how can you reinvest time and ideas if you don't have a strong company? It's almost impossible. I wanted to just to finish to flag like one of the films that was had the most success this year. One of the successful films was about the relationship, or the pardon, comment on dit pardon en anglais? The forgiveness of the victims and the victimizers of ETA. It's a film about this relationship, which is excellent, but by this idea, it wouldn't have been developed by any of the maybe of the current broadcasters or streamers, because it is not obviously a success. It was a success, like I think must have been Untouchables. If you pitch Untouchables, maybe nobody would have pay for it, but if you afterwards it becomes another thing. So I think we have to really preserve those rights and the power of rebuilding ideas, or recreating and creating patrimony.
So independency, risk-taking, and that guarantees somehow creative process and maybe also the freedom of creation. Laurence Farreng. No,
sorry, I wanted to say something else. It's very different in Spain, at least. We have a different system also and protection cinema and audiovisual work. So that it's also another story.
Yeah, I think we can come back to that, but because for me, it's of course, maybe Agnieszka can say a word on that later on. There is, of course, cinema and films produced for cinema because they also have a different career anyway in theaters, which we heard this morning are in danger too. So that's another, I think, on the top question. But before we come to that, Laurence Farreng, I mean, you... non, mais je peux parler français, ça y est, je savais que j'allais partir en anglais. Donc, Laurence...
I knew I would continue in English. Anyway, you're from the Culture Commission on the European Parliament. You work on these legal frameworks and you protect us somehow. You have been preparing this framework that is so necessary for the European imaginary. You have seen 3 countries that have shared the same views on intellectual property and on protection, and is that the direction we should go in today? Before talking about the framework and these complex formal issues, let me say a few words about the challenges and the topic of this panel discussion. When you speak of the European work, serving the European imaginary, we can see the political and strategic issues behind all of that. You said something about being naive. This is a time when Europe decided no longer to be naive and to take its fate in its own hand. This is quite recent, as we can see with the AMSD directive. Today, when it comes to the environment, or when you look at digital, at the European Parliament last week, we voted in favor of an act for digital services to regulate the digital environment. So this is a universe where we're taking our own fate back in our own hands to ensure our sovereignty and strategic sovereignty, which is essential at the level of the European Commission so that we can exist at global level from an economic dimension and also when it comes to value generation. It is also important because of democracy, because culture lies in the heart of all of this. I'm turning to our Greek minister on that. When you speak about identity, when you speak about the freedom of creating, even though we still have this debate within the European Union, Poland, Hungary, and the artists who are limited in their expression, we are in this world where we need to take our fate back in our hands. Is it easy? No, because you have the market, there's a lot of innovation. As you said before, you have rules and the balance is changing all the time.
Maintenant sur...
Let me come back on the detail of this implementation of the SMA directive, AVMS directive, because we say that platforms have to screen this quota of European works, etc., and also to finance partly the production. So the question is, what is a European work? Now, we may think about it. It is a philosophical question, you're right. But there is already, in fact, a definition of a European works in this directive. It is said that, from an audiovisual point of view, a European work, is something which has been created by the member states, but also, beyond that, the ones which are produced by countries having signed the European Convention on cultural works. That means 14 states on top of that, plus the United Kingdom that has woken up this whole story, plus the Balkan countries, Ukraine, Turkey, and even the Vatican. So you see that this definition really exists. It has been put to discussion because since then, indeed, we were confronted with Brexit. And it is a kind of trauma this leaving of the United Kingdom, leaving our European Union, because the United Kingdom is not just anyone. It is a big film maker with a lot of talents. It is also a country that produced very often, co-produced very often with the USA. And this is why it is a problem, in fact, in particular when we talk about protection of European work. So what is the European work? You can read the definition. But once the definition read, we have to raise the question, do we have to discuss with the different states having signed this convention? Do we exclude them? Should we revise this definition? What do we do? And we, the European legislators, are cautious about that. Boris Johnson does not stop being provocative for everything. I mean, not only in the world of art and culture, but also migration, etc. But we also have priority work to do. And indeed, this directive has to be transposed in all our member states. 7 member states have not proceeded to this transposition so far. And the European Commission is supposed to publish an assessment, media outlook, to look at the trends, audiovisual trends, to see where the production and how the production is doing. But beyond that, we need another assessment on the impact of the leaving of those countries. Do we have enough? Do we really have enough European production? And then there is always a possibility for the producers to go from one country to another, to settle down in Ireland and whatever. There is a way to go, around the subjects and the problems and the hurdles. At a personal level, I really understand and hear the challenges which are raised very often for the creators, directors and producers. I mean, and we have to discuss within the member states where there are some platforms too. But we need to be offensive instead of defensive. Being at the service of the European creation is a real responsibility. Now, I'm part of the political majority, and this French presidency leans on 3 pillars, which is the recovery, the power, and the belonging. So it reflects also, it bears also culture, European culture, which has to be supported and financed. Our recovery program, 57 million at the European level, reflects on the importance. We have done a lot for culture. Many countries have been active. Italy is relaunching Cinecittà, so it makes sense. I mean, in France, we also have expressed the wish to invest a lot in the field of European creation. And then it will be also up to us to better promote what we do with the prize de Luc, but it is still a little bit confidential, so we have to go beyond. We have another program which is called Euro Creative. I think that many people here in this room and participants know about, but it is too low. It's 0.27% of the European budget, where we would like to have 2%. Just to give an example. So there is margin for improvement. And even as regards the AVMS directive, there is a problem. The member states have the freedom to ask for an investment in the production. But here again, there is a big, there are so many discrepancies from one country to another. Member states, it's 1%, it's 5% in France, many countries, Slovenia 1%, etc. So here again, we did not push it far enough. But again, it's time to take control on it and to be ambitious. I did not even speak and mention the broadcasting, but the European platform that we wish for, that we call for, would also be a way to get a grip on all that, a hold on all that. Thank you very much. Before handing over to you, Bruno, again, this question of challenges. We need the definition, and we have a lack of this definition of what a European producer is. There is a will to do a European work, but we do not have the real framework that we need to make sure that we can withhold our rights and that we do not have, I mean, when we hand over to platforms, we do not have the value chain anymore. Maybe, Marc, a few words on that? I would like to react to what Mrs. Farreng said, the European Member of Parliament. There are remarkable examples like Arte or even good examples in the northern countries of Europe. I mean, honestly, it is a total failure as far as a European broadcaster or broadcasting channel is concerned. We do not have that. And there is no way to get in competition with the US platforms. I mean, we can only hope for a change. But meanwhile, while dreaming and hoping, we need to take measures. Until not a long time ago, the most important part of European production remained within European hands because the audiovisual market was a domestic one. The producers were hanging on the broadcasters. I mean, the programs were in the hands of producers or broadcasters, but it was like that. Now, 2 years ago, things started changing. What we do now is not being done for European broadcasters, but for American broadcasters. So we really have to hurry up to find a solution. Because indeed, we get some means thanks to platforms. And it's true that the industry is really booming. I mean, there is no problematic particular challenge. Sometimes we even have almost too much. So the thematic is not is not talent, it is not doing. It is this whole know-how that we have, which is improving, which is delivering and giving birth to pieces and work of arts which are more and more interesting. And what are we going to do with that? If we go on like that, this know-how is going to be put to the service with a sub-delivery system to the service of American platforms. So we need to react because those habits are going to be extremely difficult to get rid of if we do not move. It's going to be part and anchored in the way of doing things the American way. And this is exactly what we would like to fight against. Now, I don't know if it means changing the scope of the territories considered to be, geographically speaking, European, etc. I mean, the Brexit is a nightmare indeed. Because we have created a platform or a tool, let's say, to protect European works, and we are putting it at the service of a country which is not European anymore, etc. I was waiting and expecting a lot for Xilam. I have not one single platform who bought one of my works, and I have one of the biggest catalog in Europe. So, I mean, it does not work, you see? And it's even more important for the coming works, the ones which are going to be done. We need to remain sovereign. We need to keep our work, which is European. I mean, it's not philosophical anymore, you know. We need a legal definition. It's urgent. We need to calculate, to assess what we want to get with that. Thank you very much. Bruno, Patino, Arte, binational, bilingual. I mean, you are the almost perfect example of what can be done in Europe where there's a will, there's a way. And you have 6 different languages for European works. I mean, you finance at least. Arte, our saver? Well, saver. Okay, it's interesting. I want to react on what Laurence said and Marc. I totally agree on the definition of the scope, which is absolutely indispensable, and vertical, horizontal. Where does Europe stop? And vertical, as I said, for financing. Okay. To be very modest, I'm going to, I can introduce Arte as being a craftsman or craftswomen organization that wants to participate and to contribute to the creation of artistic production in Europe. It is not the platform that we should wait for. It is not waiting for Godot. For many years, I hear that one day we will have a European network, as if someone had already said at any time, here is the American platform. If you look at the number of VOD platforms that we have, you see, it's enormous. So maybe we could work on that, because there is going to be a multiplication. It's not going to be one platform, and that was my preamble in a way, because of course Marc is going to consider me as being susceptible, because we are systematically pushed aside. Yes, it's very nice what you do, but you're too small. We're waiting for the platform. I sincerely hope that we are going to have a lot of those European platforms. Okay, and someone was saying we need to think more quickly. We did that in advance. First of all, because it's our mission. Because Arte, that's Europe. We are binational. We are looking at Europe, and maybe it's a small company, but we have an enormous mission to bring closer Europeans thanks to culture. Can you imagine? This is our mission. So this is what we are helping to favor. So indeed, it is about bringing together Europeans thanks to the imaginary, culture, fiction, tales, and we do that. And I love this idea of being a craftsman's organization. We are a small model, but we are interesting for people because we do that with a kind of organization philosophy and conviction. We are not a silo, we are a network. Since we are binational, we have several people working together at all levels. We have partner channels, we have 9 in several countries in Europe. And all the others, please welcome. It's not a club which is closed. All European channel may become a member. We have cultural institutions working with us in a permanent way. Opera houses, culture institutions, etc. So it's a network because we also try to favor a cooperation of different European producers. Our cultural philosophy is very important. We very often quote the sentence by Umberto Eco. The European language is the translation. We believe in that because it is multicultural, multicultural, it is multi-language. So being European doesn't mean anything. It means being a lot of many things, many languages, English included. And so we try on our platform, on our channel, to have all the languages, Norwegian, Icelandic, Bulgarian, Czech and Hungarian, and of course French and German. And with this, we hope that Europe is going to be accepted at all levels. All the European cultures should be accepted. We understand that the soil is different in Europe than in North America. We have never decided to, from now on, work on European fiction, and a European fiction is going to be this and that. No. What I see is that there is always a little bit of tragedy. It's difficult to say that in front of you, Mr. Representative from Greek, because you are the country where the Greek tragedy was born. But it is a little bit tragic, you know. But it is indeed it is difficult because we have so many different stories to tell, so we have to choose. Well, we never have said, and we have never written, this is what our subjects are supposed to be about, etc. No, but we are always between two things, you know, different languages, different cultures, completely different. And believe me, when you work in a Franco-German kind of environment, each day that passes reflects upon the differences that exist between French and German people and cultures, and not to mention all the other cultures in Europe. But this is particularly enriching and interesting. The fact when you work for a channel like this one, Europe, it means that Europe is not only a scope or a framework, it is something that we have in common. And of course, Agnieszka Holland knows about that. It means that this space is being inhabited by us Europeans in amongst those nations, but we have a common past for thousands of years. And then the mechanisms that we have to implement all that. Now, this is quite easy. First of all, the free circulation. Well, circulation of pieces of work. When they are European, we very often have a certain number of European rights. We have those works being circulated on all the European countries when it's possible. We have the cinéma d'auteur in Europe. We have different European cultural creations in opera houses, the series, the documentaries. This is the circulation. Co-production sounds obvious. Today, only a lot of things that we do produce are European co-productions. We have 18 to 20 fictions which were European co-productions over the past years. With Italy, we had Anna. With Iceland, we had Blackpot. With and Hero with Spain. So it's only one example. The co-creation too, by the way. We try very often to have authors from different nationalities starting to fool around all together whenever it is possible to do that. And to end up with translation. Translation, we have a platform in 6 languages. We have Spanish, Italian, Polish, English, French, and German, thanks to the European Union helping us to get to use this this facility. We would like to have more, but then we have to be careful, because when I hear about the big platform, etc., then you already, I must say, you already have a wonderful tool to accelerate circulation, to look at what it brings to have a multicultural, multi-language kind of thing. But again, it is a platform which is based on European creations and works. So it's worth doing that. But we have never said we are going to be the platform, because I believe that the platform will never exist. It is going to be the platforms. But it is the European creation, indeed. And it does not mean, I mean, I totally agree with Marc. Of course, the scope is important. Tools start existing. Our tool exists, and very often the size and the scope are being confused. We mix up the networks and the scale consequences. And of course, the size is not synonymous to monsters. Of course, I did subscribe to Netflix and Disney, etc. But what happens is what will happen is the multiplication of networks, and it will really put the finger on what is necessary. So we are one of those tools. Thank you, and sorry for being long. It's perfect for Agnieszka, the tragic nature of our European imaginary now. You are a film director. You tell European stories. Many were co-produced. So it is you as a creator, as a filmmaker. Maybe you do represent this European imaginary. I don't know. Maybe I'm the best warrant. And I hope that the new generation of filmmakers will guarantee the future development and sustainability of European creation. We all know that we are in a precarious kind of situation, very difficult situation. I am grateful to Arte because it exists. It is fantastic. It is a kind of lighthouse for independent filmmakers and creators in general. And it is important for us as filmmakers or even producers or creative producers. Arte is not, and this, I mean, Arte is not putting all the work into a kind of pot where the viewers would be, spectators would be completely lost, and where the most fragile of those works would also get lost. You know, I also work with Americans, and for Americans, with Americans, I participated. I participated in in American series that I considered as being innovative, like The Wire, House of Cards, The Killing. I mean, you know, those series which were really avant-garde at the beginning, a kind of little revolution when they started. And I agree with Marc. The American platforms have increased, by the way, the production have increased the level and the quality of European productions, in particular the series, because the European series had to face and be challenged by the American series. So I can say that at the beginning they were boring, etc., but now Scandinavian, German, French, Czech series are really competitive with the American production. So, but at the same time, as they have boosted this race for quality, we very well perceive this danger that goes along with the platform doing, thinking, making. We have a lot of content now at our disposal. As Marc said before, we are almost invaded by the production. We have almost too much of it. It is extremely difficult for the Czech Republic, Spain, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland to find local teams to produce and to make a domestic production, because everybody is working for Amazon, Netflix, or whoever. So it is great for the jobs of people. It is also very good for the revenues of directors and producers, but at the same time, we can't say that it is an original European production. We observe more and more this very inspiring production 15 years ago, 20 years ago, becomes a kind of industrial thing, which is visible, but where it becomes difficult to reflect upon different subjects which are or could be exciting, innovative, or even too much emotional or too political, etc. It has to remain mainstream. Easy to digest, and for adults, let's put it that way. And it's a kind of magic. If you put all this together, you have the magic potion, and then you can sell it off to all the adults in the world. European broadcasters, distributors have neglected their own public in a certain way. The epidemic has accelerated this phenomenon. We have lost we have lost the 40 to 60 years old people, because adults are considered as relatively young adults. So all the others are lost. We see the decline and a dramatic decline of this public. And for the producers also, I mean, less big. France is relatively okay. I mean, France may survive on its own, or could. Okay, could. But for small countries, I mean, the producers are used to a co-production system. The best producers of each country have already this know-how. They have, and they look for this cooperation. If you look at the European films, some European films, sorry, I missed the titles, they had up to 10 co-producers. I have been trying to build, I'm working on a project at the present time. We have already 4 co-producers, 4 others would like to join. We don't know exactly, but I mean, it is extremely difficult to hand out, to allocate the jobs, you know. And from an economic point of view, it is not very easy. But I mean, co-producing is our chance. And it is not only for financial reasons that we do that. There is, I can see that within the European Academy of Cinema, there is a kind of feeling of belonging, you know, of a community working together, a co-working kind of spirit that moves things along, that makes us move on. I have my fellows and co-producers are very happy about that. It's better for me to have several than only one, because one you have to fight. Are you right? Am I right? But if you have several, it's easier to find compromises. So at the same time, you have to be careful not to get away, to drift away from the public, to lose out of sight the interest of public. It is easier for producers from smaller countries, instead of having this co-production work or labyrinth of different countries and languages, etc., to sell a project to, well, Netflix. There is only one signature instead of having 56 or 80, you see. Moreover, we thought that if we sell to Netflix, or we do it, but then we know that we're going to have a global public, because you know very well that we do not have so many films per year that tour around the world. Most of all, the income, the box office is limited.
So it won't be like that with COVID. But anyway, I looked at Netflix's library with thousands of movies, and no one knows that those movies are there. If there's something like pornographic, which were the most successful films in Poland were pornographic movies. Soft pornography. Well, films without any content anyway. In other words, it's very difficult to know that The movie will find a platform targeting the audience for that film. It's not like a distributor or Arte, for example, or a festival where they try to bring out movies from anonymity to put the light and to spotlight a work and to show the audience that attractive movies exist. Without that cultural work and educative work in promotion, I do not believe that we stand a chance of changing the nature of current production. It is my belief that without these very bold movies, in talking about the challenges of modernity, which are enormous, because we have been in a dramatic situation when it comes to the dangers ahead of us. I'm speaking about humankind, but also European identity and European policies. If the cinema industry is not in contact with that reality, and if it is not radical in a way, to be attractive only, we won't survive. With the best laws in the world, we will lose. And that's it. Marc was asking, how could we keep control over laws? You keep control if you finance it. You won't keep control by inventing laws and protection because money is much smarter. They will work around it. Netflix Poland is now a Polish company. HBO Europe is a European company. In the UK, it is just a Trojan horse. We could always, set up controls over those who don't pay for content. But if you don't finance your content, you will not keep control. That is for sure. Okay, and creation is the best guarantor of European imaginary. A lot has been said about France. France doesn't want to go it alone. France is a country of co-production and is very open with many mechanisms. And all of our French exporters benefit from that. I wasn't trying to say that France wasn't generous or isn't generous, but France could survive without major partners. France gave a lot in terms of co-production, much more than it has taken from others. Yes, and that is what is really powerful about French cinema that travels. But you also said that, you are the chairperson of the European Film Academy and chairperson of FERA. To your creation, you're committed to co-sharing with all European productions, transmitting something to that imaginary. Laurence Farreng, that togetherness, is that what will help you and the European Parliament to carry that voice? So that we can have a dual protection, legislative but also in creation. That's what I said before. That's what you said, madam. It is through production, through creation, and the weight we give it that we will exist. The limits of the European Parliament are too restrictive. It is the general public that we need to reach out to. We have a long way to go, even though Europe is already taking steps, but it's very confidential. But you still have Europa Cinema, which is strategic when it comes to broadcasting works. Once again, I believe that there are major ambitions calling for strong policies to support European creation to produce and broadcast European works and to make them known by the general public. Lux is a symbolic award given by the Parliament and voted on by European citizens today. You have the issue of European participation. We have a conference today on the future of Europe. It is a consultative body of European citizens to ask them what they expect of Europe. But they want a European creation. They want works that bring us closer together. They say it. Whereas we're talking about Euroscepticism and rising nationalism in states, but what we hear from European citizens is the desire to do more together. Yes, everything hasn't been solved. There are imperfections due to history. I heard what you said about the presence of the British. That's very complicated. But you can also see the challenge when it comes to calling that into question. In other words, you'll be questioning ourselves once again on the role of the Balkans and many other countries that are moving towards the extension of the European spirit. So we have these complex matters, but there's a lot to come out of finding the answer to expectations expressed by the public and by European citizens. Agnieszka, would you like to add anything to that? European thinking? I don't want to express a utopia about a major European platform. But without the political will, we will make no progress. The European Union, what it has been doing with respect to the audiovisual culture, is good, but it is certainly not enough. And this is a crucial moment, because if we lose in this area, if we don't find the means to bring back the European public around some works, platforms, broadcasters, networks, or whatever, we must be very creative, because this is a brand new situation that can be compared to nothing else that has happened before. But without a strong political will and financial resources, we cannot win this battle. At the same time, the political situation is becoming very complicated in several countries. In the European Union, you know this very well, it is becoming authoritarian. That's something we had forgotten. But we now find that in Hungary, Poland, Slovenia, Serbia, even Russia, Belarus, countries like that. If you permit, because I fully agree with what was just said, when I say we shouldn't wait for my platform, the platform, when you wait for the, with a capital T, you don't do anything. It won't happen. But when you have a political will to multiply initiatives with contacts with the public on many platforms, I strongly believe in that. I believe that cultural sovereignty today, or a common imaginary, also calls for common tools. You may have the framework that Marc wanted, all the frameworks you want, but if at some point you don't have the tools available to bring us closer to the public, that's what the platform does. And this is what I heard from Agnieszka: contextualize but not make available in a sort of huge ocean of content. So that's what I was trying to say. We need the political will so that these tools may be multiplied and developed. For us to have one, I don't want to be the only one. I'm just saying that we are one. It's sturdy, solid, but it calls for a political will for us to have many. If we lose interest in pools, we're in tools bringing us together. If we lose interest, if there's no political will in what we used to call distribution and what we could call today discoverability, meeting the public, that imaginary would be in the hands of tools and algorithms made by, I have nothing against this, made by people whose goals or whose personal culture is not based on that imaginary. So the political will must be there to set the framework, to promote talents and productions, but not losing an interest in tools, establishing contacts and relations. It's not one or the other. All three levels are necessary to build and to contribute, to defend. I don't like the word to defend. Let's say to bring out once again this European imaginary. I agree with the strong appetite for that. Can I say one thing, a word of optimism? The new generation of Europeans, the young generation, let's say the Erasmus generation, is very different from previous generations. They're very much more aware of the challenges and more accustomed to a new way of a new form of entertainment. But you must be creative. It's like with startups, like startups in Israel. There are things that come from there too. Terrible things, but things that are wonderful. I'm not even talking about Americans. I am always sorry at this European fatigue when I see how many great ideas emerged in France, Canal Plus, that came well before American cable TV. That means that you must really strive harder, push harder. So, Nicholas, I think you could help us about the public. What about the possibility of guaranteeing that European works can have access to the public on these platforms? In other words, algorithms on recommendations and a gray zone, suffering from a problem in terms of transparency and control, raising the problem of the application of the AVMS directive, you as a regulator as well. How can we see to it that our European works come first on platforms in Europe, for example?
Here, again, it goes back, in my opinion, to what I was also talking, and I also agree with what Agnieszka is saying, because to me, it's a question of, okay, I think we all agree that a framework is needed. I don't think there's anyone here that disagrees. And then I think there's a discussion that starts after that, which is, okay, so what extent does this framework have? For example, this magical platform, would it be like a public platform, like funded by the European Commission, or by like having all EU member states as shareholders? Like, I don't know, Euronews is like that model. Is this a successful model? Is this what we want to replicate? Is this what is going to bring attention to European works? So I think it's a combination of things, as I said before. The framework is your infrastructure. You need it. You need the basis. You need the funding. But also you need some kind of an understanding also of each other's creativity, because I'm not even sure that, for example, I mean, here we're people from, I don't know, 5 different countries, how familiar we are with each other's, let's say, cinematography, contemporary films, this is not an exercise that we're doing. If we feel that maybe, the missing link is a platform and magically all of us will know everything that is going on and we'll switch our viewing habits, because this is about viewing habits at the end of the day. It's like about choices. It's about, what am I going to watch? Of course, marketing also plays a role. Promotion plays a role. I think this is why it's very important that film centers, national film centers, have, in addition to, funding, they also have another, let's say, role, which is promoting, advertising, networking, going to festivals, talking to people. But the other question is, and I can also speak, using some examples from Greece. It's not that we're lacking talent. It's not that Europe is lacking talent. Sometimes creators feel that they're lacking the tools and the infrastructure to create. We have had very successful Greek directors, and they've made huge careers abroad. The dream of many of them is that, if they make it and their first film maybe is in Greek and their second film is in Greek, and then somebody recognizes them and their next films are going to be in English and they're going to be with an American studio or a British studio. So why is this happening? Is it because the lack of the framework itself, or is it also because of the lack of the funding, the lack of a mentality and a culture that would actually foster this creativity and that will enable people to stay and work, in their native countries or just, around Europe? And at the same time, we're also trapped in another competition. I mean, we're talking about all this European, solidarity in this, but at the same time, for example, Greece is competing with Malta and Croatia about the next HBO series, if it's going to be filmed in one country or the other, and we're competing in terms of like the rebates we're going to give. So you see this is a tricky thing that we need to understand and to be quite realistic about it. We need to support European creativity in a multitude of ways, in my opinion. The legal framework is a basis, but as I said before, it is not enough. And in my opinion, if we don't, as a whole, and this is where the European Commission and the European Parliament come into place, and the European, foundations come into play, because they express the common European voice. If we don't find a common ground on this, and if we don't also understand that that smaller countries are more susceptible to also follow the money, because Agnieszka said it before, and she's right. I mean, there are other countries that are stronger, and they can have their production of their own. Some others, they'll just, do what they need to do for their industries to survive. If we don't focus on that at the European level, I don't see how we can actually compete just by blocking. You need to block, but then you also need to creatively attack. And that is the part that we're missing, in my opinion.
Marc, tu veux ajouter quelque chose?
Marc, would you like to add anything to that? Coming back to what Agnieszka said, and that's very important, and we spoke about this on the phone the other day. The non-existence of a European platform and the reasons why European platforms are thriving in Europe is because the European broadcasting system has abandoned all efforts of the past 35 years. Most of the television channels operating in Europe are not interested in that public, right or wrong, because of the economic model. But anyway, that population is abandoned. American platforms have fully understood that, starting with the US, of course, because the networks have grown in the US and they have been deployed amongst that target audience. Now, that applies to cinema as well. Those who have aged 30 to 35 in France and everywhere in Europe, they have totally abandoned European cinema, apart from one here and there. So there's a collective failure. Production and the creation of stories, images that speak to the imaginary of that generation. We've abandoned the whole generation in terms of the imaginary, and platforms are seizing that opportunity. So those who are aged 30 to 35 will form the Europe of tomorrow. We need to think about that, how we can recover that generation that today operates based on images largely created in the US, but with algorithms that bring them back to that imaginary reference. And it's very hard to fight against that. We need today, collectively, to think about how we can support creation, European creation, European initiatives, using initiative funds. It may be a mixture. I constantly have been working, you're right, Agnieszka. I've been trying to control, but to control you need to be able to finance. I've been doing that for 20 years now. I finance some of my works. I get things, some tax credits. I have a system making it less expensive for broadcasters, so they accept for me to keep ownership of the work. But you need to be able to finance these works, ambitious works, because low cost is not the solution to win. That generation of those aged 30 to 35 are very sensitive to quality. They're very demanding because they are exposed to a level of storytelling that is so high on platforms. So it's not too low cost that you find a solution. It's through quality. And we need to think about this at European level to see how we can get on the move to recover a part of that generation when it comes to their imaginary. Mariela, you answered the question that I didn't even ask. How do you define a common European imaginary? And is it something that could be built based on education on images? Is this important to you? Yes.
And no, I think there are, like Nicolas said, a lot of levels. Of course, the framework is important. I wanted to pick up again something that you said, to go to the offensive. But to the offensive, we have to have tools. So the offensive is not just an imaginaire, it's something that we need, and maybe the tools is not the definition of the European work. Maybe the tools are other things. Maybe the tools are, like you said, to be able to know the data and to kind of analyze what is being seen, what is being consumed in platforms and everything. So a little bit of transparency we would need. And going back to what you said regarding young audiences, I think it's true in terms of the creation of fiction, but maybe I was thinking Europe has been very, very active in the creation of games, for example. So it was, I think that we shift a little bit the creation to other fields that were occupied by or directed to these young audiences. And also there's another very difficult and good thing at the same, which is language. I mean, the platforms had the facility of having only one language in common. Now it was difficult, very difficult also for the criteria of an European platform, the problem of the language, which, curiously, it's not a problem anymore. Because now all the platforms, even we were discussing at lunch, the people tend to see original language with subtitles. So there's something also good that's being created that is something that maybe in Europe was not achieved, was to have a common language. Now we are kind of accepting or seeing others' cinematography more often or more easily. But your question was about...
Actually, it's really... est-ce que cette imaginaire...
Well, this common European imaginary, is it built through education on images? The young people who must be educated today so that they can take ownership of our European cinema and defend it in the final analysis. Of course, it is created through images.
By seeing, but also by accepting others' iconography and others' ways of telling stories, because it's very easy. What it is easy is to consume always, like Agnieszka said, the same story told in another way. The difficult thing is to approach to other stories told in other ways. So that comes to another point that I think it's very important, that is the visibility. The visibility in the platforms or in the network, and there I agree completely with you that Arte has a very, very special way to promote their own things in their platforms or air or the way that it is broadcasted. And it's something that it is, I think there we have a big lag, and then we have to be very offensive in marketing, getting new marketing tools for our productions and our content, European content. And that is something that also has to be tackled very, very, very aggressively.
Bon, je pense qu'il est temps pour moi de conclure.
I think it's now time for me to wrap up. This morning they were dead on time. I don't want you to be late. There's one last question. Do we need other artists in Europe? Bruno, I think you have answered that question because the many platforms and not the European platform is a response to that question in part. If I may, I would like to conclude. There is one thing that I liked and that we should address this afternoon and beyond. I would speak about being combative, the will to co-construct, to build something that we have heard from all of you. And I think that sends out a signal that the rich and diverse creativity in Europe, we didn't stress this, but it is there. Today, it is in jeopardy. It is threatened. It is under pressure. But there are also many ideas and a strong will, and we need to find those ideas where we can. We need to find spokespeople in each profession using their own means. And the more we build that imaginary together, the further we reach beyond our borders, circulating in Europe, because we need to export somewhere, be it in America or in Asia. We should talk about it together in a single voice about the European imaginary. Our works speak for themselves. Let us support them. We already have Arte and other platforms that do this. Let us support them. But let us find the legal framework to facilitate this, and let's not give up, because that's what we have been hearing. Culture is our common survival, and it is also our hope to have a multicultural and diverse and varied Europe. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was really wonderful.